Hello and welcome to CLEA'S World. I'm Clea, and today I would like to share with you more of the information I've received from a 25th dimension during my last QHHT Hypnosis session. I'll be reading from a transcript of the session, and when I refer to Lorraine, I'm speaking to my practitioner who's asking me questions I prepared in advance of the session. And when I refer to me, I'm speaking to myself under hypnosis, which means the answers are coming from the 25th. I am going to be reading from the transcript of a session that was done last August. So it was a very specific time when I know I was extremely frustrated with everything that was going on because we have completed the project that we have been doing here in the overtime and overtime in terms of when the original takedown timeline happened, which was July 2022. And the group of us that have decided to stay behind, we are the ones going to New Earth and made a different choice. And there is no right or wrong choice. It is a preference. But we decided to do this project and we accomplished the project. The energy of completion has been available since, I want to say maybe back in June. And so what happened after that is that we're still not seeing the recall. So there was a lot of frustration on my part. And I know I was not the only one feeling this way. And so a lot of these questions in the session, you will notice, have to, or really reflect that mindset, that emotional state. So here is a question. This is Lorraine asking, okay, why do we still have no recall? Do we still want it since we seem to be so disinterested in everything 3D these days? Me. Yeah, so we will. It is our intention at this time. We already said we don't have to do anything. So we could change our mind tomorrow. We could change our mind in 2 hours. But at this time, our intention remains that we have the recall. And we've explained why. Because the recall is, we'll call it a 3D, but we mean a visible sign of what we have done. Something that even at a conscious level will be observed by the rest of the multiverse. They will change a lot of things. Again, we called it the equivalent of sources input last year, but that was more subtle in terms of you are welcome to ignore it. Whereas this is going to be something that is going to stop people in their tracks, is the terminology that we have used. It's not anything that people will be able to ignore. It is that significant. Because it's almost as if you had a country here. Let's use a country like North Korea. We kind of know the story that's been in the news because, again, the news never really tells you the true story. I think we know this by now, even at a 3D level. It's almost a story in the news of, say, of how North Korea has been in a dictatorship and people are being starved and people are prisoners in their own country. Imagine if tomorrow you turn on the news and he said that North Korea is free and is as prosperous as Monaco. And they were laughing. Or we were going to say the United States, but the United States is not as prosperous as we like to think. We are, of course, very fortunate in many ways compared to a lot of other countries, but certainly it's not the ultimate in prosperity. Say it's as prosperous as Dubai or one of these small places where people are much better off than in the bigger countries. You would be astounded. You would want to know what's going on. You would want to know what's happened. Even somebody like Clea, who has absolutely zero interest in the news, and we know that she's not the only one. Many people are saying the same thing in the Telegram group. You yourself don't watch the news, Lorraine. Even Clea would be investigating, saying, what? Wait, what's going on? What happened? Where did this come from? It's like an avalanche. It's like the snowball that becomes an avalanche. This is what we are saying. And this is even a small, tiny analogy, tiny example. Because in reality, what we're doing, the recall, will have many more times that impact. So we're just trying to bring home to you how huge this thing is, that to us seems so obvious, like, well, okay, so they recalled it. So what, right? Yeah, it's a big deal, but so what? The reason we ask, so what, is because we've told you before, by the time it happens, we'll feel like, well, it was inevitable. Well, it's not a big thing, but it is. It is. It's not inevitable. Even right now, it's not inevitable. They just keep going. They let time pass. We believe in that concept here, right? Time passes, nothing gets done. and they like everything. And then, like everything else that's not been taken care of, it just becomes like a remnant. So it doesn't have to happen. Still, at this point, it does not have to happen, but we are going to make it happen because this is what we decided to do. Again, unless we change our mind. Right now, we decided this is an easy thing that is not going to upset too much our 3D reality if we choose to stay here for any length of time after the recall happens. We already said we don't want to create too much of an upheaval in the system, which also goes back to what we were saying, which is, why do we want to change things here? Is it because we're stuck in a program? It's not truly. We recreate our reality every second, every split second. We're creating our reality right now. We already said reality is not real. So whatever we are experiencing right now really is all there is. We don't know what's going on out there. There is nothing out there. You were talking about your dream where you had this vision many years ago where you were walking through the strip mall or this mall, and the things that were in front of you, the shops that were in front of you were real. But as you kept walking, the things behind you disintegrated into nothing. And this was one of Lorraine's dreams. They went back into nothing because your focus had moved. Your focus is all that gives reality to things. It's almost like, were you able to turn around really, really quickly and look behind you, you would have seen there was nothing there. Because you would, if you were fast enough to move ahead of your focus, you'd be like, oh, okay, well, I forgot to create that again so that it looks like it's real. And they were laughing. So this is what we are talking about. Of course, this is not possible. The second we do focus on something, we look at something, it's there for us, right? We will always have the experience we wish to have. And therefore, we cannot really catch ourselves in a faux pas, you know? Oh, I missed that. I forgot to create that. I forgot to make it look the way it's meant to look. And they were laughing again. Of course, there is no such thing. That's why we talk about instant manifestation. There is no time delay, which also answers another question that Clea has, which is, why is the recall taking so long? Now, we understand right now that there are people, we've already spoken about the fact that there are people that are not ready, which is why we don't have the recall, which is perfectly fine. At the same time, Claire's already thinking, okay, now let's say that they become ready. They're ready, and within a month or two, they come to terms with the fact that this is what it is, and there is no point in resisting anymore. But then how long after that can we have the recall? There is no time delay, because we know this is a question that you and Claire also were discussing last week, where you're thinking, because reality is dense, it takes time for things to manifest. Keep in mind, it takes time for things to manifest because we want them. There is no energy that is dense and therefore is causing a problem for us or a limitation for us. It's not how it works. We create things to work in a certain way. At a 3D level, we use triggers. So we go to rules that make sense to us. And so, for example, if we thought that even when everybody was ready, we would take a year to make the recall happen, then sure, it would take a year in 3D time. But it doesn't have to be that. The second we are no longer in resistance, we can manifest it in a second. And when you think about it at a conscious level, you might say to yourself, yeah, but it's been coming. It's been in the works for the last year or two. And therefore, of course, it makes sense that it would happen now. But it doesn't have to make sense. It doesn't have to happen. It doesn't have to make sense. Basically, when we are ready, we can make it happen right there and then. We already said we can make it happen in a minute if we want to. We don't have to believe. We don't have to wait for anything. So Claire doesn't have to be concerned that, yeah, once we finally decide that we're done, who knows how long it's going to take for the NPCs to act on our intention. It might take 3 years for the law to go through, for a law to come through where this is unacceptable. It doesn't. This can happen. We could get the announcement today if we were ready. It doesn't have to be. We understand. Again, this comes from the frustration, which both of you have voiced, and you are not the only ones obviously voicing this frustration, where we feel like because of our choice, we say the word need. We do want to make it clear, the higher self, one more time, we'll say this, the higher self has no needs. We have no needs. However, because we are doing this work consciously, we want to be very careful and very caring about the emotions that we're going through. This is what we mean by we have certain needs or certain desires to see this pan out in a certain way. And because of this, when we say need, this is what we mean. We have decided that to achieve our goals in a certain way, we're going to do things. We're going to want to do things in this particular way. And this particular way entails that we are taking our time to make sure everybody's on the same page, everybody who has chosen to participate in this process consciously, and that we do need to make sure that emotionally we are at a certain point. Some of us, because again, it's emotions and people don't have the same emotions. People don't deal with things, we deal with personalities here. And even at a higher self level, you could technically, we talked about this in a previous session where Claire was asking us, does the higher self have a personality? The higher self, of course, does not have a personality. The higher self is one. It's like saying the source has a personality. Source does not have a personality. However, there are things that, because again, of the alignment, because of things that we do want to see happen, there are things that we prefer to do. So we have preferences, if you wish. We have ways that we prefer to feel or to experience, okay? And so in that sense, if you want to think about our higher selves as being separate entities, which is not true, but we'll use this as a way to explain this concept. Different higher selves do have different preferences because they're all aligning themselves with what they are interested in achieving. And so in that sense, even at a higher self level, we do want to be careful with how we handle things. And the higher self is extremely careful. The higher self is extremely strategic. We know things don't ever happen by chance. It's all alignment. So we don't want to, we could talk about this, but we're going to go over, many things that we already discussed previously. So we'll just stop here because we know that you have several questions. But basically the higher self, to wrap up the answer, the recall is still our intention for many reasons, not just from a 3D perspective. Lorraine. Okay, this is the second part of the question. Before we were not completed, so we waited to be completed with the expectation that once we were, the recall would happen. But now we are, and it's still not happening because supposedly not everyone who's doing this work consciously has realized that we're done. Being done was an emotional issue, and since we're all one, then everyone should know it. What gives? Or is this a denseness issue where stuff doesn't get immediately manifested? So for all we know, it will take months, even after everyone has realized that we are Neo, to make the recall happen. And as you probably noticed, this being the second part of the question, 25th already kind of answered this in the first part, but they do expand on this. And this is the reason why Lorraine will ask a question, even though it looks like it's already been answered. Me. Yeah, so we have answered this question, yes. So it's not a denseness issue. We like to think, again, we play the separation game. We like to think that our environment somehow affects us. It does not. We create our environment. And so while we talk from a 3D perspective, you and Claire were discussing, there is a program here in place. And again, we'll wait to go more into detail when the question comes up. We'll feel like there is a third party, again, which is this environment, the setup that somehow limits us, and we have to play the game by these rules. You already changed this game. It only looks familiar. There's nothing familiar about it. You know this very well, Lorraine, because we were discussing the fact that we don't feel like we're here. We couldn't care less, and we're aware of it. We're aware that our attention is elsewhere. We're barely even focused on our bodies or our reality here. So this reality does not have its own identity where things have to go at a certain pace. For example, the recall might take again a year to manifest because that's how long things take in real life. It's almost like you're waiting for a law to be passed through Congress. Well, it takes 3 months to go through the Senate, et cetera, et cetera. It doesn't work that way. Everything is instantaneous. Now, why are things so slow? Or what we consider to be slow at a 3D level, which of course is not necessarily. Everything is relative, right? It's not necessarily the case. For some people, it might be moving really fast. In fact, for Claire, time has been moving extremely fast this year. And she was just thinking about this yesterday. But again, we think about the recall like, oh my gosh, how long is it taking? And we understand that. At the same time, again, it is our choice. We are working in the background on letting certain things percolate. We already said we are completed, which means the energy of completion is available to all. We are all aware that we create our own reality. However, for some of us, this is really This is an emotional issue in the sense of saying, no, I need to become aware of very sensitive issues. We already said from the beginning, the biggest issue we've had, we've only been able to do this project because our brothers and sisters left their NPC bodies behind. We already said this was not the plan. Originally, we were going to do the takedown where everyone was going to take their bodies with them. But because of this opportunity that was available to us, all of a sudden, we could continue pretending that the NPCs are around, their loved ones are around. Of course, now this becomes an issue for us because we are doing this work that is emotional at a conscious level. This becomes a huge trigger for emotionality, which is the fact that, shoot, we create our own reality. I know what's going on. And all of a sudden, I'm aware that none of this is real, which means even I can tell these are shells because we can tell. We already said, even at a 3D level, it's very hard to ignore that we're surrounded by NPCs because the NPCs are breaking down and they're acting very strangely. If you speak to anyone, no matter their level of resistance, they will tell you, oh my gosh, people are acting very strange. And that's what it is. We see it. I mean, we see it in our social media where people post, besides posting things about, birds stalling in midair and weird glitches like that. They think they're weird. In reality, we said a million times, the matrix glitches all the time. We just choose not to see it. We chose not to see it. But even people-wise, people will show you. There are plenty comments and videos and posts about people acting like robots sometimes, or very, very strange. And these are NPCs noticing. They're like, oh my gosh, what's happening, right? So this is not something that can be denied. Now, can we make excuses, say, well, who knows, maybe it's this thing, or maybe whatever it is. Sure, we can make all the excuses in the world. This is what we've always done. We pretend. We pretend that there is a reasonable and logical explanation for things. This is our job. They were laughing. This is how we play these games. But the fact is, we know better now. As much as we want to pretend, even at a 3D level, it's getting harder and harder to ignore everything. This is what we meant by saying the veil is thinning. And again, not a veil out there. It's not something that is thinning whether we want it or not. It's that we don't really care to ignore everything anymore. We don't find it so. We are not as sensitive to not knowing these things. There was a time, for example, we'll give an example from CLEA'S life when she was an atheist. She wanted everything to work a certain way. She wanted to believe that everything worked a certain way. She would have not allowed in certain notions. Whereas now she sees people and she clearly knows that somebody's like, clearly this person is empty. He's acting like a robot. At 3D level, okay? We're not talking about feeling into it or whatever it is. I mean, this doesn't even make sense. You might look at somebody, this doesn't even make sense. Why is she allowing this in? It's not really upsetting her reality. It's not really upsetting her emotionally anymore. She goes, it is what it is. NPCs are real. We already know Clea fought this concept of NPCs for a long time, even after we started connecting. She didn't want to believe in NPCs. She said, no, that makes no sense. And eventually she had to give it up. She was like, well, I can't deny it anymore. This is where many of us are, even at 3D level, without knowing anything else, pretending that we don't even believe in what we now know. And we very much know. And it's really hard to deny. Even at 3D level, we're like, well, but there's got to be another explanation for this because this is not normal. And we already said nothing is normal. If we wanted to keep this planet, it would never look the way that it looked before. It would be impossible to recreate. We already mentioned the systems are collapsing. Some systems have already collapsed altogether. We just don't want to think about it. We don't want to realize. A lot of the systems have collapsed and are collapsing very, very quickly. And you guys were just talking about the banks, for example, how banks, even systems that you would think of, oh, it's technology. Nothing is going to happen to technology. I mean, once it's in place, it's in place. It is not real. Even technology is not real. We think of it, Clea thinks of it as, well, it's almost like a voice recording, a voice message on your answering machine. Say, I call your phone, Lorraine, you don't answer, but you recorded a message saying, hey, please leave me a message. You recorded this message 5 years ago. We think at 3D level, oh, this message has been recorded 5 years ago. It will last forever, right? As long as I don't change it, there is a system there. There is a phone number that people can call. There is a phone. It will say, it will not. We are creating it at all times. There's no technology that's keeping it in place. So we think it will stay there until somebody else goes into the technology and changes it. So you go into your phone system and put in a different message, or you remove your voicemail altogether. It doesn't work this way. This is what we've been trying to say. We create our reality second by second, if you want to think of it that way. Reality does not have to look like it's continuing in a linear manner, like it's continuing. If you were done with that part of the veil, if you didn't care, you could change it. Your voicemail could disappear, or your voicemail could say something completely different. Hey, I'm on your earth and I'm having a good time. Bye. They were laughing. Do you see? This is the thing. We like to think of things as still now. We like to think of things as being real, as being linear. So we like to say, oh, because things work a certain way, because we like the shell to look a certain way, this is how it's going to happen. For example, the recall will take X amount of time. It does not. It does not work that way. We have been trying to, and you're aware of it, we've been trying to tell you, manifestation is instantaneous. And just because you see a reality that looks similar to what you were seeing before, you think, oh, this is a continuation of the past. There is no past and there is no continuation. Our world could change right now if we wanted it to. I hope you enjoyed this session and I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Thank you for watching as always and take care.